what an American thinks about Guyana. Okay, Guyana is that country on the northern edge of South America. Guyana, it's a bunch of black people speaking like Jamaicans. Only they're in English, only they're in South America. Kind of trippy. It's a Caribbean country, you know, right there in South America. They are really, really poor, though. To get into the city, the country, right there in the border, it's a river that you could walk across, but there's no bridge. And I met a guy on the bus, and he wanted me to pay for him to get across. It was like $1. He'd pay me on the other end, but then he said he couldn't pay me on the other end, and then he said his money was stolen, and he needed me to pay him to get to the Georgetown, the capital. And I shouldn't have gone for it, but I did. And yeah, when we got there, oh whoops, he couldn't pay me. So I got scammed, but I was hanging out with his friends, he and his friends, and he was staying like one of his friends with a scam artist. That old guy, he says he uses his bad eye to make money on the street. But one of his friends lived in this house that was had this like dirt floor and lived in a hammock. It was just this like house shell right on the edge of town. It was this town, it was like the Wild West. It had dirt road, no paved, but it was on a grid system, and people would watch their movies on like at the bar. They'd have the movie up there, and then people go and watch it. And the guys would talk to the TV, like, yeah man, that Jackie Chan, he like, or that Jet Li, he like Jackie Chan. He's like, wapa, wapa, waha, yeah. And they're like talking the whole time while the thing's going. And but yeah, the whole southern part of this country is like savanna, just big open grassland. Not how you would think the jungle would be. I guess the extreme south was the jungle, but then the part where you entered from Brazil was like savanna grassland. And the road across the country is just dirt road, like 4-wheel drive. They have these big things called Bedford trucks, and the wheel is like 6 feet high, and they dig these big holes in this mud, so that normal forerunners can't even drive it. They get stuck and have to be on the side. And yeah, dude, I saw a jaguar walking across there through the jungle on top of the Bedford. We had to cross one river, and there was no bridge. You had to have the Bedford get on this thing and carry it across. And it was dirt road the whole time, but then it became like a normal dirt road, not like 4-wheel drive. And the capital city is really poor. All of these old buildings. Like from like 150 years ago. English architecture, but got built once, and now they're just in a state of decay and haven't been painted since they were built. So almost all the paint is off. There were churches all over the place, lots of churches, and lots of little mini cars, minivans, where people would drive their cars around. And instead of big buses, it would be the little minivans that you'd get on this one and go. And they were all painted and had like names on them, and had like music playing in them, and it was like his own car, and then you jump in there and he's playing his own music and his own personalized cars. But I walked around some, and one dude was scowling at me like he wanted to kick my ass. He was sitting on the front of his car, and so I was like, hey man, what you doing? I heard it's a dangerous place, and it's not very touristy. I was the only tourist I saw there until I saw these other guys on this one bus ride I was in, and they were these like college kids, and I hung out with them one night. But those were the only other ones I saw. a bunch of black dudes. I met one white guy who said he was a Guyanese, and he owned a gold mine or a diamond mine in the southern part, and he was going to fly there. Or I guess he normally flies, but this time he was going to like take a bus, and he was going to go get a joint, but he never came back. I was driving when we drove back on the bus back to the Brazil. We had to cross some checkpoint for some reason, and the dude didn't want to let us pass, and he had this big rifle, and he was wasted off his ass, and he was really pissed off at the car driver, and like wanted to refuse to let everybody go, and kept accusing the car driver that we were all going by of like being a dick and like copping an attitude with him. And the guy was totally cool. He was just like not saying anything the whole time, and he's just mumbling, and after like a half hour of that, he finally decided to stamp us through, and was like, okay, get out of here. And I was in I also I had to get stamped in when I first went there. When I was leaving, I had to get stamped out. So I went, but it wasn't an office, it was just some guy's house. And so I went to the guy's house, and I was standing there like in front of the front door, and I was like, hey, I just need to get stamped. And he kind of like was like, oh yeah, or something. And then I was just like standing there for like 10 minutes or 20 minutes, long time, while I was just watching him like walk around. And then he stops and he goes, hey, I'm not on duty right now. And I was like, oh, well, when should I come back? And he's like, oh, here, I'll just do it. But yeah, I don't know what that deal with that was, because it was in the middle of the day on a weekday. But the guys driving me back, they bought me a beer, and some like house in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing between the southern edge, this little town where I went in, across the border, and then Georgetown. There's like nothing. It's just uninhabited. There's one lady, I guess she just manned a house where people would get food in the middle of the jungle, and she was, I got some food there, like soup, but she was the only house. And there's some guy who I guess worked for her. I don't know where he lived. He had like 2 fingers, and he didn't seem to be like able to talk or something, but she was like angry with him. This big Afro dude. She's like, hey man, you don't, you're not gonna let you do that or something. And he like walked off. And then a couple of miles later, I saw the jaguar. So I guess jaguars don't attack people. I read in the newspaper that somebody found a jaguar hanging out on his front porch, but then he shot it dead. So, yeah. I was talking to one guy. He was he was exporting rare birds, like endangered birds, and he went into the jungle and would get them, and he said he saw he said the Indians out there, they can hypnotize, like he said the big snakes out there are huge anacondas, and they can hypnotize deer, and then they eat the deer, they attack the deer just by like looking at them. But he said he saw some huge monster thing while he was out in a canoe. But the Indians out there, they have these bones, and because they have the snake tooth necklace, the snake sees the necklace and knows it's a snake tooth, and so then they're afraid of the Indian, and they don't bother the Indian. But yeah, there's a couple of they speak this Creole, this weird Creole that you can barely understand, that you can't understand at all if they talk to each other. But they write in the Creole too. I read a newspaper, and they were, it was like their Creole writing right there in the newspaper. It was really weird. I could understand it, but like barely. And yeah, and there's some Indians there too, from India, who I guess contribute to the language. So that's what an American thinks about Guyana.